Hey everyone, Tactics here with more 0.1% Mythic Plus key walkthroughs, where this time we're going to be going over a Darkheart Thicket, specifically a plus 27 Tyrannical Sanguine Darkheart Thicket, where I'll be going over the route that we used, some potential adjustments you can actually make depending on your comp or how you're feeling that week. There's actually quite a bit of trash and route changes you can make in this dungeon, which is really, really interesting. And then, of course, we'll also be giving you guys some tips, maybe some easy to miss or just high coordinated group strategies to help you with some of these very dangerous bosses and trash pulls. If you're looking for videos just like this one for some of the other Season 3 dungeons, those can be found both linked in the description below and over on my channel. Plus, if you want to catch me live pushing these keys, you can find me over on my Twitch channel at Tactics, so come drop by and say hi. Otherwise, let's get into it here, where the very first pull of the dungeon, we actually do the more conservative pulls. There's really two main pulls you can do here. We stop at the bear, but some people, even on, especially on, tyrannical weeks, will actually grab the patrolling two mobs there as well. But we're going to stop at the bear here, committing lust even on tyrannical week, just grouping up here. I'm basically going to stop just past this group here and then taunt the bear in. And then we just group it up like this. Need to be careful here of the Nightclaw jumps, of course, as well as making sure we have kicks and stomps. If we actually do miss one there, I think on the screeches, which is bad, you want to make sure you stop all those. And because it's sanguine, I'm going to start kiting backwards once we get these A-bomb spawns to avoid them, and making sure that we aren't putting too much sanguine here on the grizzly specifically. But again, we have a pretty high priority target damage comp with an outlaw rogue and a fire mage, so it's not too big a deal. You can see the grizzly is fairly low health here. We didn't have a ton of sanguine healing, but I think a decent amount of it was on these A-bombs anyways, which is kind of irrelevant. From here, we are going to do a little bit of a skip. Like I said, sometimes you'll see people pull these two mobs into the actual first pull here, because they start their patrol when you enter the dungeon, like right here. So you can run over here and start the pull over at this spot instead of where we did it, if you want to add these two guys here. And similarly, some people also don't do the skip and will pull these two guys onto the hippogriffs here and chain the hippogriffs into the next pull, since they have so much more health. We're going to shroud and skip that part, but that is something that is pretty common as well, so don't feel like you need to do this skip. It's not necessary at all. You can do that. We're now going to go into the corner, which is a pull, again, most people are doing here now. So if you did the previous pull, you would chain the two hippogriffs into this pull. And the main goal of kind of splitting up the pulls in this way is reducing your Nightclaw count. So on fortified keys, you pretty much never want to have more than 2 Nightclaws in a pull. On tyrannical keys, you can get away with 3, but even that can get a little scary sometimes. But just something to keep in mind, these Nightclaws can get very dangerous, and it can also be dangerous, especially on fortified keys, to do, Nightclaw pulls back to back to back, because you're just going to get run dry on defensive cooldown. So it's another reason why you maybe don't do that skip on a fortified week. You could do it to recover your defensives before this next Nightclaw pull. Basically, we're going to bring them into this corner here. And actually, this is probably a good time to talk about the RNG of Darkheart Thicket. So, outside of like maybe the very first poisoner mob of the dungeon, the ruiners and the poisoners are RNG spawns in this entire area here leading up to the first boss. It's not ideal. It's just something you kind of have to deal with from run to run. And the reason why that's problematic is there are certain pulls where you're pulling maybe 4 of these caster mobs. And you're going to see here on the next pull, we actually have bad RNG, and I don't realize it until after we started the pull up, and it gets really messy. It's probably the biggest time loss of the dungeon here is about to come up. But basically, the number of ruiners in this pack, the number of poisoners in this pack, and every other pack in the starting area outside of like the first pull is going to be RNG. You want to try and make sure on fortified weeks, your number of poison dispels is equal to the actual number of poisoners. So we have 2 here, 2 poisoners, not a big deal. If you have a third, you will need a little bit of RNG help and usage of dwarves or externals, or getting lucky and having the poison go on the tank. And on the other hand, if you RNG into too many ruiners in a pull, you need some kicks to really help with your tank damage, because your tank is going to be getting absolutely blasted. But this is a fine RNG for this pull. I'm just pointing the hippogriff chargers into the wall here. I'm going to need to start moving because of sanguine. We have just our dispels going out on the poison, and we're just keeping kicks on the ruiner here. We're going to see the Nightclaws are the priority targets here because they are the most dangerous mobs. And I'm just going to start moving the pack as the first Nightclaw dies, because again, prio damage, so they're nuking that Nightclaw, and then basically once this pack starts getting low, we're going to kill everything except the Hippogriffs if I fast forward here, because they have so much more health than everything else, and we're not focusing them, and I'm going to take the Hippogriffs into the next pull, which is where things get weird, and actually where I think we'd adjust the route. So a lot of people are playing both these next two packs together here. Let me turn. A lot of groups are playing this together. Notice there are 3 Nightclaws in this pack total. Ignore one of them over here is the patrol, so ignore that one. But there's 3 Nightclaws in this pull. This is probably not something you're going to do on Fortified Week. And honestly, I'm not super forward anymore, I think, on Tyrant Week. What I think we should have done, and what's going to be in the route linked in the description, is we're just going to pull these 2 Razorbeaks into this pull alone. What you'll notice, if you look closely here, there's actually 4 Ruiners in these packs. Every single mob has rolled into a Ruiner. There are 0 Poisoners and 4 Ruiners. Again, this Poisoner is the patrol. So you can see I can't even really see there's a 4th Ruiner in this pack. So I just actually go in here, but with Sanguine, with the kicks, we were not fully prepared for this pull, I don't think. So just be aware, learn from our mistakes. But I think in general, we're just not going to be pulling this pack here. We're probably just going to be killing these Razorbeaks on this pack. And then you can either sap and we could sap and mind soothe because we've already shrouded. You can also jump over this wall here with double jumps, or like a rescue on a mount, just like you do to skip the bears as well. Something like that. Or just stealth, of course, that works as well to get around and not pull this pack. So something to keep in mind there. But we add it here, and things go a little crazy because you can see there's that 4th Ruiner hidden around the corner. We have to deal with all the kicks, the screeches. Sanguine's going to go out, and then we don't have a great AoE silence option, right? There's no Vengeance Demon Hunter in the group, no Boomkin, that kind of thing. So it's very hard for us to kind of move these things, and things just go a little bit crazy here. It's going to be a lot of Sanguine healing. I think we do manage to recover with only 1 death, but basically, I'm getting dispelled on cooldown essentially from the healer because of the stacking magic dot. We're rotating through externals from the healer. I use barrier as an external here. I have to end up moving out of it. I'm trying to move the mobs out of the Sanguine with little luck because there's 4 casters spamming here. But doing our best. Use Divine Toll there. I missed a few, but I tried my best to actually get them out. We're missing Star Stops, which is not ideal. Things are just basically going crazy here. But I think through everything, we do actually manage to somehow recover this. Committed my healing pot. Almost dying again. It's fine though. Big knocks there. Got the Nightclaw 1 down. 2nd or 3rd Nightclaw is still alive here, but it's almost dead. So the party damage is done, and then the healer can basically just full focus me with these last Ruiners. But also the kicks get a bit better here when there's only 3 Ruiners instead of 4. So I procced my cheat there. We basically committed as many externals as we possibly could. We managed to get through it, but yeah, in general, I'm not going to recommend doing that ever again. I'm going to recommend just pulling the 1 pack, assuming you have a way to get through this hallway here. We're now going to pull these guys forward, and we pull them onto the patrol. And you'll just here we are RNG'd into 3 Poisoners. On Tyrant, not a huge deal. On Fortified, you may need to start thinking about who you're dispelling and what defensives you have available. But here, because there's 3, we can kind of leave it up. It's on me. And actually, they're desynced here, so we can actually get a decent number of the dispels anyways. But yeah, if it's on me usually with a triple Poisoner pack, we could leave it on if they were synced up and casting them all at around the same time. But they're not here, so it's not a big deal. I think we also accidentally butt pull, yeah. So we accidentally butt pull these guys. But again, I think with dropping the 1/4 pack, we may... Well, my guess is how the route's going to be changed in the link is we're going to be pulling these guys, and we're not actually going to be pulling the patrol here. Here, end of this. So what you're probably going to see different in the route is we're not going to pull this. So you're going to need to watch where this is and maybe CC the Poisoner if it's in like this spot over here, so it's a good pat, because you'll probably need to be grabbing this 4-pack instead of this 3-pack. Plus the patrol, plus the 2 guys on the edge. That's what you'll need to be pulling instead. But I think that pull is much safer because you can delay adding these guys a little bit if you want to. And because there's only 2 cats in that pull instead of 3 in the previous pull. So in general, I think that's a much safer pull and something that also applies to Fortified. So I'm going to put that in the route instead. But then we have our skip to get to boss, which we just we use Shroud obviously, so we're just going to have the rogue and the priest go and trigger RP. We get rescued over onto the tree here, which of course you can also Warlock Gate to it if you have a Warlock in your group. And we're going into the first boss, which is deceptively difficult if you aren't used to playing this boss on a high key. You have to be very, very careful with your space. What you're not actually worried too much about, at least in our comp, is the Grievous Sleep murdering the person baiting, which again, this will always target the furthest player and then jump back to the tank. So that's the other thing a lot of people don't know. Grievous Sleep does a hit on the furthest player, and then it jumps back to the tank and deals a hit around them. So you don't want to be under your tanks. You don't want to be moving during Grievous Sleep because you will get people killed. So you're going to see here, I'm basically going to plant every time a Grievous Sleep happens, just so that no one actually gets murdered. Boom, then remove. And again, we only have one melee DPS, but he's playing a little bit back. He's got long arms too, so he's staying away from me as best he can as well. And basically the name of the game here is conserving space. So the other thing I'm going to do here, I'm just going to eat these Primal Rampages. There's like virtually no tank damage on this fight outside of the Primal Rampages. Obviously, the Grievous Sleeps do a little bit of damage, not too much. So I'm just going to rotate through defensives to eat this to kind of keep the boss in a relatively stable position here. And then we're just going to make sure that we are in tight enough to deal with these adds here. They're going to spawn. Of note, slows are super strong on this boss fight to help you conserve space. Our rogue actually switches to crippling poison on this boss fight and then switches back to atrophic after, because we don't really need atrophic to deal with the actual Grievous Leaps, which we'll talk about in a second here. Our cooldown rotation for that. But basically here, it's all about ad control. We want to try and kite these, in a relatively decent position. Obviously, you can use stops and stuff to kind of change the fixing, whatever. And notice how tightly clustered these circles are on the ground. Again, I use this wall behind me to have the knockback position be relatively close. I'm planted for the Grievous Sleep, and then I move afterwards to get towards these adds to get effective cleave. And you can kind of see how this ad is getting kited a little bit through these existing puddles here, and how we use knockbacks to kind of help group them up and disorient and whatever, to kind of throw him back through the already existing puddles here. For this rampage, I probably should have already moved towards the edge a little bit here. The boss moved a bit more than I wanted to. We were kind of focusing on killing the ads there. And that's kind of the name of the game, is conserving as much space as possible while, still killing the ads, not getting hit by them, not sending in their puddles, but making sure that you have enough space for the rest of the fight, because these puddles don't despawn, right? You need to use your boss room, especially on higher tyrannical keys. Now, let's talk about the Grievous Leaps here, where our mage baits every single one of them. And basically, we just rotate through various externals and personals for him. So you can see there, Evoker Bleed Cleanse just got used there. We rotate through Evoker Bleed Cleanse. We rotate through my sack on him. We rotate through Altar, which can heal him back up to full and remove that bleed. We also have Pain Sups available to him when he calls it. And of course, we have Bop as well available if he really needs it. That's kind of saved for an oh shit moment. But it's not too big a deal in general, because with the number of CDs that we have, he really doesn't need a ton more, as long as he doesn't get meleeed and stuff like that. You can see, like, sometimes his health barely even moves because, he's a mage, he's got barriers and stuff like that anyways on his own as well. And so the combination of those cooldowns basically makes it so the healer isn't constantly stressing about healing him up. More than half of the time he gets leaped on, he clears himself without any real help from the healer. Healer's just kind of pumping. He's doing big damn. And so, yeah, in general, all about space conservation. You can see here, we're at 20% health. We could have used the space even a little bit better. Like, we have all this open space here. We could have used better on a higher key, but we have a decent amount of space left here, which is why we're rotating a little bit harder than we usually would. Maybe on a 28, 29, we'd have to rotate slower than that. But you generally, want to kill the boss around the exit, which is why I started over on the side there. So, slight reduction in runtime, but not a big deal. But yeah, big space conservation fight. Use those slows. Now, past this, we are going to basically skip as many dryads as possible. So we're going to play one dryad in this entire route. So you're going to see here off the top, we're going to sleepwalk the dryad. Any threat reduction CC can work here. And I'm going to run and pull these blossoms. They're not linked, so I can just pull these blossoms. Same deal, we're going to Mind Soothe or Sap or whatever. Walk around the side here. And then we're going to play this dryad here. In a bit of a weird spot. I think we might blast wave this one to get in a better spot. Yeah. And this is a neat spot here, okay? There's a neat spot where you can snap all the blossoms and also hit the blossoms behind the hut. You should be careful. You're going to back hit as a tank. Right here between this rock and this tree. And I can start hitting these guys and it'll aggro them as well. And then they'll all snap right here. And we use AoE stops here while they're root bursting just to make sure that I don't get hit while I'm trying to group them all up and snap them. And then, of course, once they're all here, I think we missed one. It's going to slowly walk around. We just focus the Dryad first, being careful of Sanguine. I think we're just going to let the mob jump away and then kill it out there. And then we're going to start kiting the Sanguine out. Nothing too crazy here. But basically, that's the only Dryad we play in the entire fight. They're just a bit annoying. And also, you never want to play a Keeper. Playing a Keeper is just the death of a high key. There's too much health with the healing done. And these roots, these blossoms are already quite healthy here, right? So it's not something you can viably play, I think, on high keys. So you need to find ways to skip every single one of them. With this next one, I believe what you can do is you can just like, a lot of DHs are like misery melding this pull. We have a rogue, so this is what we shroud. And we're actually going to shroud all the way to the next track. Like we're skipping this Dryad as well. I think he does like sap her as we shroud past. Boom, just to make sure that she doesn't pat back onto us. And then we're going straight into the Nightmare Dweller pull, which again, this is all about AoE CCs. Check the AoE CC weak core there on the side. I'll link it in the description if you guys want it. It's neat. It was the idea was by Liquid Max, but this one is not his. His is not public yet, so it's just a community member has made this one, which functions similarly to that one there. And we're just kind of going through AoE CCing these guys, getting kicks when they're necessary, just to make sure that we don't get a single cast off. And then we got Oakheart. And you notice here, Lust is now coming up. Lust has been up for a couple minutes because we did Lust that first pull of the dungeon. So we are going to rip our second Lust here on Oakheart. And this is a tough boss. This is a tough boss. So a couple things you want to know for Oakheart, especially on higher tyrannical keys. The first is Shattered Earth. You want to make sure you have some sort of group defensive running for every single one of these. This is mostly to the benefit in our comp of the Evoker and the Priest. They're the ones most in danger. The Rogue can feint everyone. The Mage has a button for everyone. It's not a big deal for them. But for the Evoker and the Priest, they're in a bit of trouble. So we rotate through things like Zephyr, like Mass Barrier from the Mage, like Disc Barrier. And when you're out of stuff, the Evoker just rescuing the Priest for a shield is enough as well, because again, the Mage and the Rogue can live on their own. And so that's kind of what we rotate through. Scales as well is kind of thrown in there into the mix, but Scales is a little weak on its own in general for some of these hits. Sometimes it is enough, but something to keep in mind, it may not be for some of these abilities, especially as you get into higher keys. So that's the first thing, having something, especially if you're a squishier class, for the Shattered Earth. The next is the roots. And where you really want to make sure you are cleansing these, in an efficient manner, depending on your comp. So we have Freedom in our comp. We also have Rogue who can vanish, which is not as consistent, but that's why we try and do things like stacking these roots, because he can go on top of them and then vanish, and that will also clear these roots as well. I believe I have Freedom these ones. So basically what's going to happen on odd spawns of roots, I'm going to be Freedoming the Evoker here, and he's going to just run around and touch them all, and then we're going to kill them. You will notice sometimes they take damage before they've actually been freedomed through, and that's just because for some reason Fire Mage's Ignite, I believe, is dealing damage to them through that somehow. Who knows how, but that's them. So that's like the main thing to keep him on top of. If you have too many ads going out, it can be quite dangerous, especially because aggro can be a little weird, because we're talking about tank stuff now. So what are we doing for tank stuff? The Nightmare Breath. You want to avoid this as much as humanly possible. Getting hit by a Nightmare Breath is not the end of the world, but it does eat into your defensives, which you really want to kind of stack onto the Crushing Grip. So you're going to see here, as a Paladin, I'm going to start inching away, and I'm going to Steed as soon as the Nightmare Breath actually starts. But you notice there, I was inching before. I see this go down on my bigwigs timer. I'm inching, I Steed, and then I'm gone. And then I come back after the breath goes down. So that's how I can avoid literally every single breath on this fight. So any spec that has some sort of movement can do that. I think the one that has the hardest time is Guardian Druid. DKs, obviously, they have a hard time getting out of it, but they don't really need to get out of it because they're DKs. That's really not as big a deal for them as some of the other specs. But Guardian, I think, has the hardest time. But you need to basically do what I do, potentially even run the speed talents and just, wait, and then book it pre-moving to. And if you have the speed talents in the general tree, you will have enough move speed to run away. And also, of course, every other breath, you should have a Stampeding Roar to assist you as well for that additional kind of speed and breathing room, which is it can get you out just as quickly, basically, as I did there. Crushing Grip, that's the next thing to talk about. You need a good CD rotation. Very, very heavy tank buster. Maybe the hardest hitting tank buster of the season. Trying to think of any others, like individual tank busters. I can't think of any right now. So might be. You need to layer your cooldowns. Notice here, I saved my Sentinel for this moment. I popped the Sentinel after I came back from the breath here. So it's a full stacked up Sentinel. And you'll notice as well, my Consecrate is directly between Oakheart's legs. This is very important for prop paladins. Technically, when you're in the air, you are directly between Oakheart's legs. So if you drop your Consecrate here, you will be considered in your Consecrate. You'll notice here my weak aura stays the same color when he picks me up because it still considers me in my Consecrate. Alternatively, if you mess that up, while you're in the air, you can drop your Consecrate again. And that again will put your Consecrate between Oakheart's legs, but it'll still count you as being in it. So something you can do. Here I just use Sentinel. Full charged up Sentinel with Eye of Tear, and I of course use my Word of Glory on myself a couple times there. We come back down, and this is, again, onset of Strangling Roots, killing those, trying to get them before the actually, this is an even set. So this is what, I believe this must have been just a rogue. Yeah, okay, these were just stacked up. This is an even set, so I didn't freedom this set, but we were able to clear a few anyways because we stacked them relatively tightly, and the rogue was able to vanish on top of them. Any other cleanse can do that too, by the way. Like druids can shapeshift cleanse, Tiger's Lust works, Soul Burn from warlocks, that kind of stuff. So if you have that in your group, use that. We had the rogue vanish outside of freedom, so that's what we were using here. And now it's just rinse and repeat kind of game, right? Make sure you're avoiding the frontals. Make sure you have sieges assigned. I bubble taunt this one. Note, Paladin note, again, if you are bubble taunting one of these crushing grips, you need to make sure you taunt the boss near the end of the grip, because he will just re-aggro someone else because he technically throws you out of taunt range or bubble range. Because again, bubble taunt, weird with range issues. So I immediately taunt the boss before he's done throwing me, just before, so that he doesn't go and melee someone else. Something to note. And I freed him just before that happened so that our Evoker could clear the third spawn of roots there. And again, rinse and repeating here, making sure that I have CDs planned out for this boss, running away from the Nightmare Breath. And that is kind of this boss fight here. I'm going to have my Absorb Shield here with instantly pop Sentinel, which I get partway through the thing. Easy. And just spell coverage, right? A spell warding also is great coverage for this as well. Freedom's going out. We're clearing all these roots to prevent the number of spawns. We have a barrier on the ground there for that shattering earth, making sure everyone is alive and healthy. And you're just going back and forth from here. So hopefully this guy helps you guys with Oakheart a bit. I know I've had a lot of questions about Oakheart. Covered him in my boss video. It's a tough boss. It's a very, very tough boss. Probably one of the harder bosses in here, along with Xavius, is likely going to be the biggest walls. But anyways, we'll get to Xavius in a second. From there, moving forward, Tainted Fury, not too much to talk about. We basically just chain this guy onto the slimes here. Make sure we get AoE stops on the Blood Bolts as well, because these will one-shot. So we just do AoE stops the whole time. We don't pull the second Fury. So we're just waiting here, pulling all the slimes through. There is a neat thing you can do. We didn't do it on Sanguine Week, but on non-Sanguine Week, on Fortified Weeks is probably good as well. You can give someone a Wernstone, and they can jump down, pull the 4 bats, and Wernstone back up, and then you can drag the bats onto the boss, basically, which is nice. You can cut out a trash pull that way. But otherwise, this is a very easy boss. It's one thing, exactly the same as Shattered Earth on Oakheart. You want to do the exact same thing on Earthshaking Roar. Make sure you have some coverage. Again, for the most part, the Rogue and the Mage are not too worried. So we're rotating through Mass Barrier, rotating through Zephyr, rotating through Disc Barrier, and Rescue Shield for the Evoker and the Priest, just to make sure they specifically are healthy, but also just everyone is healthy for those hits. Make sure you have coverage on every single Earth-Shaking Roar, otherwise you are in trouble. And if you're able to handle it, if you have some sort of benefit from having Whelplings up, you can kind of add them as you throughout the fight. But again, if you're adding bats to the fight, I wouldn't worry about these Whelplings. Kill the bats and then add Whelplings after if you want, if you have some sort of benefit in your comp. But otherwise, this boss is definitely the easiest boss of the entire dungeon, so we're not really going to talk about him too much. There's no secret tech or anything like that. Just don't be stacked up during Earthshaking Roar, and make sure that you have a CD running. If you're stacked up, multiple people can get ticked by that puddle. That's why you don't want to stack. Otherwise, we can go. And this is the pull we'll do instead of pulling these bats onto the boss. And this is the next neat piece of tech. Okay, Taintheart Stalkers, extremely scary mobs, especially on Fortified Weeks. However, you can cause them to not cast their ability if no one is at ranged. If everyone stacks up under this stalker, he will not do his dash. There's actually 2 stalkers in this pool, so something to keep in mind. You can go into this pool. We stack up directly underneath it. I, as a paladin, will solo kick the summoner. Everyone else is going to make sure that the imps, kick some firebolts, but really you want to make sure that you're stopping the big fire debuff the imp puts out there. So that's what they're going to be focused on here. Otherwise, everyone just stacks under the stalkers, and you notice they just won't cast their ability. Their ability is off cooldown. They won't cast it. It's a little weird here because it's Sanguine Week, and we're going to have to move soon, and there's going to be a stalker alive. So, if you need to do this on a Sanguine Week, things like stuns and knocks are pretty good. I think we ended up probably just eating one set of dashes here. I don't actually remember if yeah, there it is. One set of dashes here, but otherwise not the end of the world. And then we regroup here and we chain knock this guy up a little bit so he doesn't actually do a second cast. And of course, Bloodseekers, disease dispels are king in this dungeon. We have 2, so I'll usually use my dispel first when I get a couple stacks, and then the priest will use his dispel second when mine's on cooldown, and we just kind of repeat like that. We are now going to mount up and skip this pack. Something you can do, I think specifically in Vengeance comps, this is a pretty nice pull because you can just like chain CC, group them up relatively easily, especially if the pat is up here, Silent Sigil, that kind of stuff. We don't have a Vengeance Demon Hunter. This pack's super hard to control. We just skip them and because that's much better in my opinion than playing a 3-pack and then a 4-pack. It's kind of annoying. So we skip them and we drag these next bats into the final pack of the dungeon as well. Also a stalker in this pull, and there's going to be 5 bats in this pull as a tank, so something to be aware of. This pull also gets a bit weird because of Sanguine, just because of the stalker and the specifically also the gun guy here, because he will just not follow you downstairs super well, and also you'll see actually one of our bats gets stuck as well. So I'm going to walk in here. I'm going to Bubble Taunt to prevent those first sets of diseases, and then we're going to go back to that dispelling thing. Again, I'm solo kicking the summoner. We've got the imps making sure he's covered by someone as well for the Dread Inferno. And then as things start to die, I'm going to kite down a little bit to try and avoid that Sanguine. We get 1 stalker off because our Proud damage is actually a little bit off, I think. We killed the summoner first somehow instead of killing the actual stalker, which is weird. We were definitely supposed to be Proud targeting the stalker there, so that should have died first. So things get a bit weird with raid damage there, but we end up kind of cutting around this way. Up top, you can see, though, one of our bats is stuck, and the Deadeye is up there just casting on people. So I'm going to LOS the Deadeye down here to bring him down a little bit. But then I realized the Bloodseeker's not coming, so it gets a little weird at the end. But it's fine. On a Sanguine Week, you can just play the whole pack up there. It becomes so much easier. Or non-Sanguine Week, sorry. So much easier then. But then, Xavius, everyone's favorite boss. So this is going to be the wall strategy, which is pretty common on higher keys. So you're going to see here, I'm going to pull the boss off to the side because you basically need to get him into the wall. And by pulling him in this way, you're essentially putting half his hitbox in the wall. You can see like that, which is very useful for P2. Irrelevant in P1, very useful in P2, and you're going to see that. P1 is first fairly straightforward. You don't really want to use a lot of your things on the abilities here, like Feed the Weak, for example. This is a huge Shadow Meld / Vanish / any combat drop ability in P2. In P1, you're kind of chilling. You just want to make sure you live it, but you don't want to actually pop too much on it. You'd rather save those for P2 when potentially he has a couple of stacks, when things are a bit more chaotic with the swirlies and dodging, that kind of thing. So don't commit any of your combat drops here to this first phase. Save them for the second one. Unless you're a rogue, of course, they're going to be vanishing a fair bit, so they're free to do that. But other players, like if you only have a Shadow Meld, if you only have Greater Invis, you probably want to save that for P2. In general, in this phase, it doesn't really matter where the guys are. We have a range stack and a melee stack, essentially, and the Invoker's playing a little bit between them, going away. But in the final phase, you'll notice the ranged play at range, like around here, and melee play in melee. And again, you have 2 melee stacks where you have the good stuff, good buff, where you have to stack here, and you can have the paranoia buff on the other side, so that melee can hit whether they have the debuff or not. Not a big deal. Otherwise here, not really a lot to talk about in P1. Just kind of shoot stuff out. And you get the swirlies in P2. So for this, we're going to commit barrier. I actually think I make a slight mistake here. You're going to see the boss come slightly out of the wall because I took a step to the barrier. I should have just not gotten in the barrier. I didn't really need to be in it. Not the end of the world, but we use Barrier and Zephyr for that because they're not really too useful on the rest of this. I guess Barrier maybe has some uses, but Zephyr definitely doesn't. You want to make sure you live. We save something like Mass Barrier and stuff like that, but I think maybe we should have just committed Mass Barrier and Zephyr, and that would have been enough to live, and we could save regular Barrier. But anyways, you're going to see here, swirly spawns. So how these work, and I talked about this again in that boss video a little bit, some are random targeted, some are player targeted. So, you know, this one was on the Rogue, for example, here. And in general, having the boss half in the wall helps reduce the hitbox, and having the range stack play away from the boss here, like this is on the range stack, helps to prevent the number of baits on the boss. So that combined helps you to not have too many stacks. You can see I literally tank the boss in one spot the entire phase. I'm not going to move. If he gets a stack, he gets a stack. The only time you'd start maybe panicking if he starts getting 5, 6 stacks, then you might be, okay, maybe we need to move. You can see here, 1 stack, refresh. He got 1 stack earlier, and then it expired. 1 spawned on me. You don't even need to move as a tank. You can pop a defensive on it. It doesn't deal a ton of damage, but again, the 1 stack, and it's going to fall. He might get a refresh here. He gets a refresh, 2 stacks. You know, this is something to be aware of. I watched him. I think I gave him a word of glory. But then 2 stacks refreshes, right? So that's the benefit of playing in the wall like this. And by having your range stay away, you can actually, you know, drastically reduce the amount of stacks the boss gets while also not moving the boss at all. So it's very, very nice for your melee players. They don't need to be constantly guessing. Range as well can kind of ping pong around in the back. So it's overall really, really like this positioning of the boss fight. Makes it a lot easier for sure. But there we have it, guys. This is my title key walkthrough for Darkheart Thicket. Hopefully this does help you out, and if it does, be sure to leave a like and subscribe for more content like it. And don't forget to stop by my Twitch channel at Tactics and say hi. As always, thank you so much to my subscribers over on Patreon. Appreciate you guys, and I appreciate everyone here watching now. So thank you as well, and I'll see you all in the next video.